Hello, and a big welcome to you out there who are watching this and listening. Today we have a special guest. It's Jacqueline Kemp. And tell us a little about where are you from and what are you doing?
Yeah, thanks for having me on today. I own a small business based out of Seattle, Washington, and it's called Sisu Training. And I work with both dogs and horses. So a lot of my experience in the horse world comes from my background training dogs, specifically service dogs of all kinds and varieties. And now I've taken some of that psychology and training practices into what I do in the horse world.
Yeah, and we were talking a little about that. Wouldn't it be nice with a service horse?
Yeah, I have seen some, but I have not ventured into that world.
No, they're a little too big for that, maybe.
Yeah,
But how are you doing this? Tell us about that.
yeah. So I started out in the dog world when I was in middle school, high school, and I started training as a volunteer for a nonprofit organization called Guide Dogs for the Blind. Really great organization based out of the west coast of the U.S. And they rely heavily on volunteer raisers to train their dogs for about the first year of their life before they then, if they pass that year of training with constant evaluations from paid professionals, then they go on to a formal training. And if they pass that, they get placed with a visually impaired or blind person. And then they become a full time guide dog. So that's where it all kind of started. I had no involvement in the horse world at that point, but I knew I loved working with animals and I just was a sponge for information. I wanted to learn as much as I possibly could. And I really loved uh, the service aspect of it and helping people. Um, so as the years went on through college, I started getting involved with horses. I opened up my own business, training dogs privately. Just started with, some general obedience stuff based on what I'd learned from my volunteering training. And then as I worked with more and more and more dogs of all kinds and all situations, I took on every client I possibly could. Even if it was something that I was a little unsure if I was able to help them, I just did it and I found a way.
Mhm.
And I started building up a good client base, reviews, all of that. Um, and I started getting back into service dogs. And I found that I really had a passion for the people side of it. I really liked meeting individual needs of the owners and handlers, whether they needed a dog that was, just basic puppy training, or if they needed something specific. Like I've worked with a lot of people who needed dogs for their children who have autism or different disabilities. And I started carrying that over a bit into the horse world in my practice. So on the horse side of things, I started learning from my trainer how to start horses under saddle, how to start working with them and make a connection. I didn't really have a lot of uh, knowledge about like liberty work and connection at that point, but it started making sense what I was doing with the dogs. And I thought to myself, why can't I do this with horses? A lot of, I don't fully do reward based things with horses, but the mentality of the positive reinforcement, giving them what they want, finding their motivation for things rather than it just being an old school American way of training, which is make them kind of fear me more than they fear whatever it is that they were originally
Mhm.
afraid of or avoiding. So I started researching, learning, taking concepts from how I train dogs, which is a lot more positive reinforcement, and transferring that into the horse world. And then I slowly started taking on, more people, especially kids, who have different insecurities and things. And I started seeing an opportunity that we can use the horses to help them by kind of teaching them how to work with the horses, because that gives them a certain level of confidence that they are training an animal, especially a big animal like a horse. It gives them a different sense of confidence that they've generally never experienced before.
Hmm. Yeah, and I imagine that your way, they also will get a whole other connection with the horse in this way.
Yes, absolutely. I love telling people the little, facts and tidbits about horses that most of my clients have never heard before, like that the horse can feel your heartbeat from feet away.
Mm.
Um, and teaching them concepts about, well, if the horse can feel your heartbeat from when you're not even touching them, um, maybe we should learn some techniques for how you can regulate your heartbeat, or even just noticing, um, is your heartbeat really fast right now because you're nervous or you're afraid or you're upset about something outside of the barn, in your personal life? And how do we regulate that? And how do we use the horse to kind of help us with that?
Mm. Yeah, that's great. Do you have many students then?
I have a few right now. I'm trying to build my program a little more. I don't take on a ton of clients because I like to, have time for them. This is also not my full time work. So I work full time. I have, a corporate job. And then this is my second job. So my dream is to be able to make this full time at some point in my life, but still working towards that goal.
Mm. Great. Do you have your own horses, or are you borrowing horses, or do the students come with their horses to you, or how does it work?
A little bit of all. So I have two horses. I've got POAs, Pony of the Americas. I have Raven, and then my other horse is actually my mom's horse, Ruby. So they're 13 and 6, and they're just great little ponies. I like them because they're smart and they're almost the size of a full horse, but they're a little bit smaller. But they're not quite ponies.
Mm.
So they're great for both kids and adults. And then at the barn where I board, I'm allowed to use the barn's horses for lessons as well. And I have a couple of clients where I actually will go to them at their barns or their homes, and I will work with them on their horses.
Right. So you had some good stories to tell, you said. So please let us know.
Yeah, yeah. Um, a lot of what I have learned in the horse world and what I teach people these days has come from my own experience. And I didn't start out knowing very much about horses, and I've had to learn from a lot of different trainers, and then really just become a sponge and listen and learn to everyone I can, and then kind of decide for myself what makes sense and what works based off of the knowledge I already have. And that goes for not just the training side and like what I've learned from dogs and applying it to horses, but also from my own, anxieties and traumas throughout life. And I find it really miraculous that horses were placed in my life at a time when I was dealing with a lot of, mental struggles and hardships outside of the horse world. And horses really were something that opened a door for me to healing. And that's what I become very passionate about in helping other people who have had similar struggles, whether it be specific traumas, PTSD, or if it's just anxieties and insecurities, confidence issues, those sorts of things. Um, So yeah, I do. I have a lot of stories from my horses in particular, and then from my clients of how those horses have really come alongside us. Um, I could start with one. Um, my horse Raven and she's the first horse that I ever purchased. She was the first horse that I fully started from the ground up. And when I started working with her, she was already 8 years old. She had been a brood mare. She'd had two foals. She'd lived out in Montana on a ton of acreage, and she had really just kind of been left to herself in a herd. She was halter broke, but not much more. So she would, come in for the vet and the farrier, but then she'd just be left to herself to roam around in the pastures, really. And when I started working with her, I did not realize at the time how alike her and I were. But I started, as I was working with her, to get very frustrated with her because she did not want to be around people. She just wanted nothing to do. She was not mean in particular. She just wanted to be left to herself. She had a lot of what seemed like some past trauma. She didn't really want anybody to touch her mouth in particular. She would just, flick her head up over and over again if you got anywhere near her mouth. But I had never witnessed her be hurt there, so it must have been from her past. She was very shy of adults and tall people. Just a lot of insecurities, but she was also the boss mare, and no horse at the barn could do anything without her permission. That was very clear, and it bothered me as I was working with her because I'm a very direct person, and when I'm working with animals, it's at least when I was starting out, it was very much like, I'm asking you to do this, do it, right? That's kind of the American Western way of training horses. And this is where I had to grow a lot because Raven could not be manhandled. There was no, making her do anything. A keyword, making, right? That's kind of the methodology that a lot of people use is, well, I told you to do it, so you're going to do it, and you're going to do it now. And if you don't do it now, there are going to be some major consequences, right? And we put them all in this box where we just assume that if we put enough pressure, we use enough force, that that they will just comply, right? And that's kind of the concept of breaking a horse versus starting a horse. And this is where I had to go through a lot of growth in my horse training to learn, there is definitely another way where you can actually make a partner out of your horse, and you can get them to be connected to you and wanting to work with you. And that's kind of what Raven taught me, was that I had to make it her idea to want to do things. But I had to learn first about myself, that, I also was kind of a shell, where I had some hardened walls around me. I didn't want to interact with other people. And I thought to myself, if I'm asking her to do these things and connect with me, and I'm doing the same thing to other people, maybe I need to work on myself a little bit before I can really connect with this horse. And kind of taking that approach and working with her as if she were me, really changed everything. She went from a horse that, her previous owners had called her literally a demon horse and said that she would never be ridden. And now I used her as a lesson horse for young kids. And, she's just the sweetest thing. She gets sassy on me, but she's very sweet and very smart. And I think the one big story here is about 2 or 3 months after I started working with her, I had barely put a saddle on her, um, because she just wasn't interested. She was making it very hard on the groundwork and in hand work. And I was just getting really demoralized about it. I'm thinking, I'm going nowhere with this horse. This horse does not want to work with me. Maybe this horse needs to just be let to sit for a while longer, because I'm not making any progress. Um, and then one day she was out in the pasture with a couple other horses at the barn. And there were two of them in particular. One was a 2-year-old big paint mare who was very, very low in the herd hierarchy. And then I was going to grab this other horse, Snickerdoodle, who was a lesson pony, and I was supposed to put some work on her. So I go out and I am haltering Snickerdoodle, and I had forgotten that Presley, the big paint mare, did not like Snickerdoodle and would pick on her anytime she was being haltered, because she knew Snickerdoodle was very kind and wouldn't fight back. Well, Snickerdoodle was only about 12 hands tall, so her back, barely comes up to my chest. And all of a sudden, as I'm haltering her, my back up against the fence, Presley comes up and I see hooves in my face. And she's just bam, 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 double barreling at Snickerdoodle, trying to tell her off. And I'm thinking, there's nobody else at the barn. I'm either going to get a hoof in my face and get seriously hurt, or I'm going to get pushed into the fence and trampled. So I'm really worrying here because I have nowhere to go as I'm getting pinned up against the fence. And out of nowhere comes Raven. And Raven pushed herself between the two horses and pushed Presley off, got her away, and then she walked right next to me, between me and Presley, to make sure that I was safe all the way across the pasture until I got to the gate and out the gate. And after that moment is when I started getting a connection with her, and our training finally started to progress. And I think because she opened herself up to go, oh yeah, I'm going to protect this person. This is my person. This is a part of my herd. And I'm going to take care of her.
Mm, that's great. And that's a great feeling. I can imagine what you felt when you walked with her by your side. As
Mhm.
she really told you that she loved you.
Yeah.
So yeah, and we learn so much, as you said, the horses just like us in many ways, and we will have to work on ourselves to uh, to work with the horse. It's the first step to do something with yourself. You always say that horses is your mirror, so
Mhm.
that is right.
That is absolutely right. And I think it's very important for people to work with sensitive horses. I think it's very important for people to learn on sensitive horses. Oftentimes we get the old schoolmasters, and there may be some different concepts of what a schoolmaster is. I think a schoolmaster is not just one who will sit there and take the kicks from little kids trying to get the hang of things, but also isn't so upset by it that they go take off, right? It has to be somewhere in between where they know their cues, they know when to give a little and when to take a little.
Mhm.
Um, and the horses that I prefer tend to be a little more on the sensitive side, um, because I want people to learn that every single one of their actions, starting from the ones they don't think about, like their breathing and how it affects their heart rate, their mood for the day, right? Are they coming in angry or upset about something? All of those things majorly impact how their ride or their in hand work is going to go with the horse that day.
Mm.
And that is not something that they're a slave to. It's not something that they can't fix. They have an opportunity at any moment throughout their time at the barn to make a decided shift in themselves. And it's really amazing to help people work through that and have them come to the realization of, wow, the horse completely changed when I did that,
Mm.
right? That's
Mm.
kind of the big aha moment is
Yeah,
I changed myself and the horse responded.
that's right. And there's a lot with body language and thoughts and yeah, energy. Everything is seen on the horse when you're with them.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And a lot of that comes from dogs as well. You know, with dogs, it's all body language as well. We teach them more verbal commands than we do with horses, just in
Mm.
general. You know, sit, stay, come, wait, all
Mm.
of those. Um, and where I get people making a mistake is they say the word already expecting the dog to understand what the word means, right? But you have to associate the word with an action first. And a lot of that has to do with body language and learning to communicate with the dog or horse in the way that they're going to understand it, not
Mm.
just in the way that you understand it. Because that's part of breaking that big language barrier between you and an animal. And I bring a lot of that to the horse world because while we don't tend to use as many verbal cues, some people do. Um, and yeah, we can say whoa and walk, trot, all of that. Um, but that concept of my body language means something. And I'm not going to go straight from 1% of asking you to do something to 100% making you do it or get angry with you because you're not doing it and now I'm punishing you, right? We have to learn the difference between correction for a horse when they didn't listen to a very clear cue or what we thought was clear, um, and and actually just making them more frustrated because we're disciplining them in a way that isn't making sense to them. You can't have correction if you're not also showing them what they can do instead of the behavior that they offered, right? And a lot of that takes patience. And it's that mirror thing you mentioned. If you're really frustrated and your energy is all upset and agitated, um, your horse isn't going to be in a place to learn anything. So sometimes you let them move their feet, wander around a little bit, then you come back to that cue you were trying to ask them for. Um, and then oftentimes that's when you start to get the result. You let them wander a little bit mentally and then choose to come back to you. So
Mm.
it's their choice, it's their learning process instead of I must do this because I'm being ordered to.
Yeah, and as a rider or equestrian, you learn a lot about yourself as well, and you can use that in everyday life.
Absolutely. I've got another story. I think a lot of people have probably experienced this. I've got a rider who, on Ruby, my 6-year-old horse, my mom's horse, is a really good horse, but she definitely will get testy with her rider, especially if you start getting in a battle with her, she will fight back. And she'll win that match. You know, you can't outpull a horse, and you shouldn't put yourself in a position where you have to. But sometimes it happens. Just your mood, the situation, whatever it is. Well, I have a rider who is very tense and likes to be in control, just in their everyday lives as well. They're the one that's always making decisions and taking care of people, and that mentality carries over into how she rides.
Mm.
And oftentimes, what happens is So get the horse in a very nice walk, loose rein, all of that, doing the warm up 10, 15 minutes, and everything's going well. And then when it's time for the trot, immediately hands come back, shoulders come forward a little bit, legs shorten, and then they're all up in the horse's face. And the horse is, head up a little bit, maybe opening their mouth, doing a little gaping. And it's like, whoa, where did this come from, right?
Mm.
And the key issue is I get this response not just from this student, but from a lot of students of, well, they started to go too fast, so I pulled back, right?
Mm.
And I think we have to change our conception of that in our own lives as well as in the horses' lives. When there's too much energy, when there's too much, momentum in a direction that we don't want to go, the answer is most often not to pull back and resist. It should be instead, how can I steer this, right? How can I go with this and steer it into something that can be useful or beneficial, right? So if somebody tells me that the plans that I made today aren't going to work and actually we're going to go do something else, I don't need to get stressed out and tell them that no, they're wrong and we're going to go do what I planned instead. Maybe we find a middle ground, right? Maybe
Mm.
we look and see what their reason is for wanting to change the plans and we go with them a little bit and we still have a good time because they're our friend or whoever. With horses, when we go up into the faster gaits and a lot of people get nervous and that tension all comes back and I want to control this. I want to be in control. This isn't going how I anticipated it was going, so I'm going to just shut it down, right? And it gets into this big tense pulling match. And instead, what I tell people is sit back and loosen the reins. And they go, I can't let go of the reins. The horse is going to run off on me. The horse is
Mm.
going to, go off into the rail or pop their shoulder out to the side and go this other way. And they're usually amazed when they let go of the reins that the horse relaxes.
Mm.
And they go, oh, right? Not in every situation, but in a lot of them, then that horse is just reacting to what you're doing. They're
Mm.
just saying, you're trying to shut me down, but I've got all this energy and it's got to go somewhere, right? And if you give them an avenue, well, maybe I won't completely let you out and give you a loose rein, but I will turn you. I will make you think a little bit. We'll go this way and then we'll go that way and then we'll stop and then we'll back, all of that. Um, it helps teach the rider and the horse to be flexible mentally, and that affects the physical state as well.
That's right. Yeah, nice to hear about, and I love when people find other ways to ride and to handle the horses. Uh, we don't have to be tough and rough and all these things. And as you said, human beings have their own way, and when we get scared, we grab the reins and we do things that the horses don't understand. So we have to learn a lot about ourselves before we can ride.
Mm-hmm.
Really, really good.
Yeah.
Yeah. So thank you very much for this. Do you have a homepage or you have a Facebook or something where people can find you if they want to get a lesson?
Yeah, absolutely. My Facebook page is Sisu Training. I have Facebook and Instagram. I'm trying to start posting more regularly there. And then you can also find my personal pages at Jacqueline Kemp, also on Facebook and Instagram.
Okay. Thank you so much. And thanks to you out there who have been watching and listening to this podcast. And please subscribe so we can meet more people all around the world who are taking care of the horses. in a good way. Thank you, Jacqueline,
Thanks
and
so much for having me.
goodbye.